Just a few minutes by boat from Venice sits a small island that the Italian government has tried to sell and failed. Not because of its location, not because of its size, because of what is buried in its ground and what happened inside its walls for centuries. This is Poveglia. And once you know its full history, you will understand why even the fishermen who have worked these waters their entire lives refuse to go anywhere near it. The island before the darkness. Poveglia is a small island in the Venetian lagoon in northern Italy. It sits between Venice and the coastal town of Lido, surrounded by open water, roughly 17 acres in total. For its first 1,000 years, it was simply a place where people lived. Farmers, fishermen, families. Records show that people were settling on Poveglia as far back as 421 AD, when mainland communities fled to the islands of the lagoon to escape barbarian invasions sweeping down through northern Italy. For centuries, life there was ordinary. Then in 1379, a naval war between Venice and the Genoan fleet brought intense fighting directly into the lagoon. The entire civilian population of Poveglia was evacuated to safety. When the fighting ended, the residents never returned. The island sat empty, and Venice, being Venice, quickly found a use for the empty space. The plague quarantine. In 1348, the Black Death arrived in Venice. The city was one of the busiest trading ports in the entire world. Ships arrived daily from the Middle East, from Asia, from across the Mediterranean. And with those ships came a disease that spread faster than anyone could track and killed faster than anyone could respond. The Venetian government acted quickly and without sentimentality. Any ship entering the lagoon that showed signs of plague among its crew or passengers would be diverted immediately to Poveglia. The sick would be removed from the ship and placed on the island. Most of them never left. Those who died were buried in mass graves cut directly into the soil. When the graves filled beyond capacity, the bodies were stacked and burned in large open pyres on the island's surface. The ash and the bone mixed into the earth itself, layer after layer, year after year. This did not happen once. It happened across multiple centuries. Wave after wave of plague returned to Venice through the 1400s, the 1500s, and into the 1600s. Each time disease threatened the city, Poveglia absorbed the dying. By the time the quarantine era finally ended, historians estimate that somewhere between 100,000 and 160,000 people had died on that island, on 17 acres of land. To understand what that number means physically, archaeologists and researchers who have studied the island report that the soil itself has a distinctly different composition in certain areas. Darker, denser, mixed with ash and fragments of human bone that go down several feet. Local fishermen have reported for generations that nets dragged near Poveglia regularly surface with bone fragments. The ground is not just earth, it is the compressed remains of over 100,000 human beings who died there in suffering and fear. This is what the island is built on. This is what everything that came later was built on top of. The long silence and Napoleon. After the plague quarantine era ended, Poveglia went through a period of quiet. In the early 1800s, Napoleon Bonaparte briefly used it as a military depot, a storage point for weapons and supplies as his forces moved through northern Italy. When Napoleon was gone, the island was abandoned again. For nearly a century, it sat empty in the lagoon. No residents, no activity, no purpose, just the water, the wind, and what was left underneath the surface. That silence ended in 1922. The asylum. In 1922, a psychiatric hospital was built on Poveglia, receiving patients from the mainland. Its isolation wasn't a drawback, it was intentional. Patients arrived by boat with no easy way to leave, and there was little outside oversight. Records from the facility are incomplete, but what exists shows overcrowding, poor funding, and conditions far below medical standards. Patients were confined on an island already known for centuries as a mass burial site. The most unsettling part of Poveglia's history centers on a doctor. According to long-standing accounts, he became obsessed with the island's past and began performing unauthorized experiments, including crude surgeries and lobotomies without proper justification or consent. Over time, the doctor reportedly lost his sanity. He claimed to experience things no one else could explain. Eventually, he climbed the asylum's bell tower and jumped. Some versions say he survived, only for something mysterious to finish what the fall began. While not every detail is officially confirmed, the asylum did shut down permanently in 1968 after years of decline. The buildings were briefly reused, then abandoned. Since then, Poveglia has remained closed to the public, its dark history left behind in silence. What remains? The buildings are still standing, barely, but standing. Plaster falls from the ceilings in long strips. Trees have pushed through broken floors. Vines cover the exterior walls. The bell tower still rises above the waterline, visible to anyone crossing the lagoon on the way to or from Venice. In 2014, the Italian government attempted to lease the island for 99 years as part of a broader effort to privatize underused state assets. A businessman placed the winning bid with plans to develop the property into a luxury hotel. The response from local Venetians was fierce and immediate. The concept of constructing a luxury resort on ground, holding the remains of over 100,000 plague victims, was considered morally unacceptable by a significant portion of the population. Protests followed, public pressure mounted, the development plans collapsed, and Poveglia quietly returned to its abandoned state with no clear future. A limited number of journalists and documentary filmmakers have been granted restricted access to the island over the years. Their accounts are notably consistent with one another, regardless of whether the individuals involved personally believe in anything supernatural. They describe a quality of atmosphere inside the buildings that is difficult to articulate, a heaviness, a stillness that feels different from ordinary emptiness. Unexplained sounds from rooms that have been sealed for decades. A persistent sense of presence in spaces that have been uninhabited for over half a century. One Italian television production crew abandoned their equipment on the island mid-filming and left without completing their assignment. They did not return to collect what they left behind. Whether or not any supernatural explanation is required for these experiences, the psychological reality of Poveglia is straightforward. This is a place where more than 100,000 people died in terror and pain over several centuries, where vulnerable patients were isolated and mistreated for decades, where the physical remains of the dead are literally embedded in the soil beneath your feet. Some places carry their history lightly. Poveglia carries every year of it. The plague graves, the asylum, the doctor and the bell tower, the bones in the fishing nets, the government that cannot give it away. Poveglia has never needed legends to be one of the most disturbing places in the world. The documented history is enough. Subscribe for more stories like this one. And tell me in the comments, would you spend a night on Poveglia?